This is WNBF Binghamton at WNBF.com.
The following program is paid for by the No Frack Almanac. Opinions expressed during the program are those of the show host, guests, and callers, and do not necessarily reflect the opinions or beliefs of Town Square Media or News Radio 1290 WNBF Binghamton.
You won't take nobody when you go. You won't take nobody when you go. You won't take nobody, but if you do right by God, He'll lead you to the sea where rivers flow.
Special June 8th, 2014, No Frack Almanac presents anti-fracking edition of the Nobody Show, your unabashed voice of waiting for the drone strike radio. And the number to call in here on WNBF is 772-1290. That's 772-1290. Now I got a lot I want to cover tonight. And we did this show last on April 27th. And right now we're just doing it kind of periodically. And everything I'm going to do on this show follows from that show. So for those of you who didn't listen last time, I'm going to bring you a little bit up to speed because I think, well, some interesting things happened last time. Let's just leave it at that. Last time I started out by saying that this is a one-sided issue. It's like slavery. There's only one side to the fracking issue. There's not two. And no one's going to call in and with a good case to make for fracking, and sure enough, no one did. And the reason that I say this, and it's important to note this, is because it reflects something about the media climate that we're in, that now we have this fantasy that there are two sides to everything. And this is I don't have time to go into all of it because of media consolidation, because of big corporations running the news, because they don't want to have opinions, so there's like supposed to be two sides. Anything you say, you know, should it be up, should it be down? They have crossfire, it's always that, with the exception of national security stories where you're only allowed one side. And that's how it happened, and I think this sums up a lot about the current media situation. Scott McClellan, who was the press secretary for W. Bush when they did the second Iraq war. And then he wrote a memoir called What Happened, and he talked about how easily the press had been duped in that war. I don't remember the exact words. And this created some consternation because, after all, the press had gone along uncritically with this line, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq and all of that. So Scott McClellan wrote about how easily it had been duped, and everybody tried to answer it. And NBC brought out Tom Brokaw with a deep voice. And well, Mr. Brokaw has had a long career. I don't wish to criticize Mr. Brokaw, but he did say something that I thought summed up what's wrong with journalism in the United States today, and certainly the difference between this show and what he does. Because he said about this, he said, well, I don't know, I think we asked the right questions, he said. I think we asked the right questions. And that shows that his idea of what a news person does is ask the right questions. Now, where I'm from, a news person's job is to get the right answers. And we have had too much of this where we're not getting the answers. We didn't get the answers about these non-existent weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That's our job. That's why it's important to tell you there's only one side to this issue. Because we're giving you here the answers. We're giving you here the evidence. We're not giving you here some pretend there have to be two sides because that's what the advertisers or somebody say there have to be, or our policy or corporate or whatever it is. It's a one-sided issue. And I said last time no one's going to call in with a good case. No one did. But I got a call from a guy who I misidentified. It wasn't his fault. It was just one of those things that happened. I'd had an earlier call named Don. And I picked up the wrong piece of paper, and I called him Don, because I had a little piece of paper saying Don had called, and then this was a different guy. And then he said, no, I'm sorry. He said, my name is Vic, and I misheard him, and I said, oh, I'm sorry, Dick. But actually, this guy's name was Vic, and we had a long discussion. Some people criticized me for allowing him to go on for too long and make his points, but that's okay. I didn't think he was saying anything, to be honest, of any significance, really. And I thought better to let him go on and let people see exactly what I said, how empty the arguments are the other side. But what I didn't know last week, last show, April 27th, was that there were plenty of people who knew Vic. I'm not from Binghamton. I didn't know Vic. But Vic is actually a guy by the name of Vic Furman, who is a present or former, it says on his, I think, LinkedIn profile that he's a present employee of the Joint Landowners Committee of New York, the JLCNY. Vic is a paid spokesperson, or he was, but in any case, he represents people who stand to make money for drilling, and he did not identify himself as such. To me, that's just sleazy. If you're listening, Vic, that was a sleazy thing to do. That's misrepresentation. Because he's making all these arguments to me as if, well, this is what a citizen might think. Not, this is what someone who wants to make money might think. And where I can give you an example of where this really made a difference, he was arguing about how, I'm quoting him now, he said, it's a minor interruption to your life. He was talking about the noise, the traffic, all of that stuff that comes with fracking. He said to the people who are suffering from it, it's a minor interruption to your life to serve the needs of the people right here in the United States. So he's posing as someone here to serve the needs, like there could be someone out there who mistakenly believes this is in the interest of the United States to frack. And he's there posing as someone, that's what it is. Well, we're only concerned about serving the needs of the people of the United States. Now, I told him there's nothing patriotic about fracking. When Alderson developed it, they were also selling nuclear bomb triggers to Iran illegally, got fined for that. There never was patriotic. I pointed out that there's no truth to this idea that it's a minor interruption, by the way, for people. People's lives are destroyed. People have to move from this. I pointed out to him it's not his job to decide what is a minor interruption for other people. It's their right to protest when this is imposed on them. I've said fracking is tyranny, that they're standing for this thing where they have a right to impose this whole thing on you, even drill under your property, put pipes under your property, and you have no say in it. But it would have been a very different thing if instead of saying, if this guy Vic had said, instead of, it's a minor interruption to your life to serve the needs of the people right here in the United States, would have come out very different if he'd said it's a minor interruption to your life so I can line my pockets and my friends can line their pockets. And that is the entire pro-fracking argument. The entire pro-fracking argument is about, we're going to line our pockets. We want you to bear the burdens of fracking so we can make the money from it. That's the entire argument. They try to package it as, oh, it's going to be good for the country. There's no way they can sell that. That's not true. This is not national pretension radio or one of these bought-off networks where they have all their advertising on, and the gas companies, and I have to be falsely neutral. This isn't good for the United States, and the person who's out there shilling for that position is really fronting for people who want to line their own pockets with it. So I don't like that. I don't like that dishonesty that you come on my show and you're dishonest, Vic. You, the Joint Landowners Committee of New York, I don't like you coming on the show and being dishonest. So I really want to spend this show showing the people what kind of lies you told. What kind of lies you, with this false flag, come on this show and tell people so that when they've heard this show, they're going to understand some things they didn't understand before. And I'm going to start with a clip that Vic, a clip of Vic, this guy Vic, though I called him by the wrong name, on the show last time. And here was an amazing little dissertation he gave very briefly where he was talking about the Halliburton loophole. The Halliburton loophole is where in 2005, while nobody knew what they were doing, basically in the dead of night, even though technically it was the day, when Cheney, the former president of Halliburton, was vice president, they passed laws that exempted fracking from the Clean Water Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Superfund Act, the Clean Air Act. All of these laws that people had fought for, people had said we have polluted streams, polluted communities. We fought for these laws so that our water would be cleaner, our children would be healthier. And then overnight, the federal government was basically all of these laws were just overridden when no one even knew what was going on. And Vic offered an explanation for that. And So we're going to play that clip from Vic now.
Albert loophole is not real. In 2005, 2 senators from California put a bill into Congress to do away with the federal oversight of fracking. And the reason they did that, and the argument they made on the floor, was that there's no need to do it at the federal level because every state that's drilling is doing it themselves better than the federal government can do it. So why be repetitious of the fracking industry? Why should we repeat what's already being done at state level? And by admission,
do you believe that, Dick? Do you believe that? Are you serious about that?
By admission in the federal government, the states were regulating it better than they were.
Oh yes, and you're somebody who believes everything the federal government tells you?
Well, apparently everything you're talking about, you believe. Again, I believe what I want to believe.
But you believe when the federal government says this is going to be well done by the states, you believe that?
Yeah. Look at New York.
I'm going to thank. Okay, so that was Vic talking about this. Now look, first of all, on the face of it, it's an absurdity. It's like saying, let's just tear up all the fair housing laws because the states will enforce it better, the Fair Housing Act. Well, in fact, the states had an atrocious record. As I pointed out, it's like saying, let's not have a Centers for Disease Control because the states can do it better. No, you need a central place. There was a reason why we had those laws in place and a reason why the industry attacked those laws. But this is what they're trying to sell you, is about the state regulation. And then later on, I got a call from somebody named Mary, and I think that Mary was another one of these shills, whether she works for the JLCNY or not. I don't know. She didn't talk like a real person. She called up. She had a 56-second speech, and it had 2 parts. One, how good fracking is for the poor, total fabrication. Totally not true. I have personally researched that. There's totally the opposite of the truth. Drives up rent, drives up costs. Poor people become homeless. It creates more desperation. It's questionable whether it helps more people than it hurts. But never mind. And then this was Mary's second point.
Know that this can be done safely, and New York State is top as far as learning how to regulate and keep any energy development safe.
This is what they have to say. This is what they're pushing under their false flag with no integrity. They're calling up this show to push the idea, why, that's the best thing in the world is we can have is states regulating fracking. They've got this idea that fracking is like Jurassic Park. Oh, sure, it's dangerous, these dangerous chemicals, just like we know the Tyrannosaurus Rex is dangerous. But we're going to have this Jurassic Park where, just like they had in that movie Jurassic Park, these electrical cables that would shield everything off, we're going to have these regulations that are going to make the whole thing safe. You can bring your children to it. No one's going to get hurt. And we're not going to have one Jurassic Park. We're going to have 20, 30, 40 of them. As many states as have fracking. Why, they're all going to have these regulations, and it's going to be safe. The regulations will protect us, and New York's are better than anybody else's. This is what we would call a lie within a lie. New York's regulations aren't good, and fracking can't be regulated. And that's what I want to expose to you. And by the end of this show, you'll know the truth of what I'm saying. And I have a call, though, which I'm going to take right now. The number to call in is 772-1290 here on WNBF, 772-1290. Jim from Windsor, welcome to the Nobody Show.
Nobody, hey, how you doing?
Good. What's up, Jim?
Oh, the science is right on. I mean, I don't agree with everything everybody says, and I don't think anybody does, but you're right on with your science. I mean, think about, without any of the paperwork in front of me, the cover-ups, the doctors being gag ordered down in Pennsylvania, right. Just the in-your-face information, there's really no doubt about the science. People are now, I think the damage was done when they did the cover-up, fracking's totally safe, and people were drinking the water, and animals were getting fed the water and stuff like that. Now they've moved on, apparently, to, the problem mitigates over time, which I know a lot about mechanics, and yeah, I had figured that early. But you know what? The damage is there. The chemicals are still a big secret. Who really has to question the true science of that?
Well, you're right, basically, Jim, in what you say, although I have to say, how is it going to mitigate when they're drilling tens of thousands of new wells all the time? They're drilling and drilling and drilling. How could it ever, even if it did mitigate, something can't mitigate until it's stopped?
Yeah, I agree 100% on that, definitely on that point. I called too, also, mainly, well, I wanted to agree with you. I think, people should. I mean, it's common sense. I mean, you don't have to be a genius to see the in-your-face stuff. I called because, and I'm sorry to try and cram in an hour in 2 seconds here, but I called because, I mean, look at how much, now there's a big propane shortage. Like you said, they're putting in new wells all over the country. Now they got to move into here, right? Or they can't rake in the money anymore or something. Propane's they're charging me more. Half the country's being fracked.
Right, but the propane shortage was artificially created.
Absolutely.
They reversed a pipeline. They're trying to scare people. These people are not patriots, and they're not friends of this country. They wanted to make hardship for people with propane prices while simultaneously declaring how good it is for the poor, so that we would be stampeded by their claims that if we frack more, we'll have lower propane prices, which is nonsense. It's a manipulated market, and they want to export the gas. But anyway, Jim, I got to move on.
Thank you.
I thank you very much for the supportive call and for being somebody who's paying attention to this issue. Thank you. Okay, let me get back now to what I want to talk about, what I was starting to talk about. I'm happy to talk to anybody who wants to call, and it's 772-1290. I was talking about this claim that the shills for the gas industry make, that this is all going to be regulated like so many Jurassic Parks. We're going to keep this dangerous process safe with these regulations, and New York has the best of them. Well, okay. First of all, the issue of whether or not New York has the best of them is irrelevant. We don't. People who know this field tell me that, when you look at all the regulations, some are better in one state, some are better in another. There's no one state that's better. But, of course, remember, the regulations don't work at all. But we can say for sure that New York's regulations are not acceptable. There's no requirement in the New York regulations. This is what they're touting to you. No requirement that well casing jobs have to be monitored over time for deterioration. This is one of the things that causes leaks. There's no requirement that that be monitored. Well, the industry doesn't want to be monitored. But there is a requirement for compulsory integration. That means that if you own 20 acres and your neighbor owns 40 acres, and you don't want to lease your land, you can be forced to lease your land so as to make a 60-acre pool. That's the law. This is why I say fracking is tyranny. They can drill under your land without your permission. And they're the ones claiming to be the apostles of property rights. Can't I do anything with my property? No, you never could. You never could harm your neighbors with what you do on your property. But it used to be that you were secure in your own property. One of the things that we had in our Declaration of Independence was when the British were quartering their troops into the homes of the colonists, and we said that's not acceptable. People have a right to safety and security in their own home. The government can't put in troops. That's one of the things we rebelled against. And now we've got it, not that the British can use our homes, the oil companies, gas companies can come and drill on our property without permission. That's in the New York regs. So if you really like tyranny, you'll love the New York regs. No requirement for them to have any, in New York regs, information on the cumulative impacts of this. They don't have to study it. They have it amazingly in the New York regs that they're touting. They don't have to keep on file the location where frack waste, which can be dangerous, is buried after 3 years. Well, a thing like Love Canal takes many years to develop sometimes. So they don't even have to do it for more than 3 years. So that in 10 or 20 years, communities start having poisons leaching into their water supplies. The law has been designed so nobody will know where it came from. That's not even common sense. But the industry wants to avoid liability. This is a gift to the industry. And they're turning around and telling you, these are the best regulations. This is Jurassic Park, can't hurt you, while they're deliberately setting it up so that you won't even know where the poison comes from because they don't have to keep records. They don't have to report an accident for 2 hours. You get into an accident on the highway or something, you're going to report it right away. They can have a rig blow up. They don't have to report it for 2 hours. Why is that? What are they doing during those 2 hours? And then they say, in New York, a 500-foot setback from homes and places of assembly. I actually saw one author say, actually, it's a 100-foot setback, but let's call it 500. I'm not sure of the details. Well, Dallas, Texas, passed a 1,500-foot setback, which in the Texas Observer was described as, quote, one of the most restrictive natural gas drilling ordinances in North Texas. Not the most, just one of them. What they have in North Texas, where they have more experience with fracking than we have here, 1,500-foot setback. Here it's a 500-foot setback, which is being touted as so wonderful and protective. 500 feet, by the way, at the noise levels these rigs can generate, you can be, your children can go deaf if they are exposed to that level of noise at 500 feet for 24/7 for a long time, which is what winds up happening. In other places, in North Carolina, which is a very conservative state, they wanted to have a 500-foot setback, and then they changed it to 650 when they realized that wasn't acceptable. And the head or the vice chair of the commission looking into it said, if you look at rule sets across the nation, no one can come up with scientific reasons for the setbacks because there's no science. As Sandra Steingraber and others have pointed out, there are chemicals in the frack fluid like benzene for which there's no safe dose. And the radon that comes up, which is a radioactive substance, comes up from the frack wells. There's no safe dose. How do they regulate that? And then as for setbacks from schools, well, Colorado has a 1,000-foot setback. North Dakota and Maryland have 1,000-foot setbacks. We don't have that in New York. So what are we talking about here? It's just not true that New York has the best regulations. That's a lie that they're telling you to lull you into accepting it. They're coming on this show under false pretenses and telling you things that simply aren't true. And I'm just getting warmed up with what they said that wasn't true. So, all right, I got a caller. The number to call in here, well, I've lost my place. The number to call in here is 772-1290, and I've got James from Endwell, I hope is still there. James, are you there? Do I have James from Endwell?
Hello.
Oh, hello, James.
Hi there.
Hi, welcome to the Nobody Show.
How much I appreciate your show. You know, somebody that AM radio is Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity, you know, a lot of the guys from the far right. It's good to, you know, get it balanced out a little bit. You know, the pro-frackers, the big corporations behind them, and so much money. So, you know, it's good to hear the other side. But I just want to say that, oh my gosh, Pennsylvania is just starting. There's probably only 1% of the wells of that drilled. And we've seen so many damages from that. I can't imagine what it's going to be like in a few years.
Absolutely right. People don't understand the scale of it. They're talking 200,000 wells in Pennsylvania by the time it's done, or more.
Yeah, it's just a very small percentage, and they're going to have so much more environmental destruction, the air pollution, and you know, so many effects. And one of the arguments of the far right that you hear is because I'm using natural gas in my home, that justifies their argument. I just think that's ridiculous, because if New York State would pay more subsidies to put a solar project, maybe I could afford it.
Actually, New York State has some pretty good subsidies. Maybe they should be better, I agree, but NYSERDA is something to look up. Anybody wants to learn about solar. I got to move on, James, but you got a last point you want to make?
Yeah, the politics of it. Lately, Senator Schumer said that he thought most politicians, most Democrats are supportive of fracking. Then you have Obama recently came to Cooperstown, and he's I think he made mention of the gas, you know, being one of the saviors. And we've got our health commissioner who's moving out of the state. We're wondering what's the politics behind that, and kind of wondering if he's getting out of town, if they approved it. And
yeah, you got to wonder. He was afraid he was being set up as the scapegoat, but we don't really know. But you're right. It's all politics, and it's all money. And on that note, I want to thank you very much for your call, James, and for your support.
Thank you.
Good talking to you. We also have on the line Lawrence on a cell phone in his car. Lawrence, are you there?
Yes, I am. I just coming down from finishing up haying up in Cortland, and I just had a point to make. I read in our local newspaper how a person went to our commissioners' meeting, and at the commissioners' meeting, she asked a question: how many deaths have been caused by gas drilling? And the coroner of the county was there at the meeting, and when he said no, it kind of took the wind out of her sails.
He said none, I guess you mean.
And my point is on this matter is that how you said when you ask the questions, you don't get the straight answers. And when that person got a straight answer, it was actually disappointing to her. And the other side of the coin is that there are many people that absolutely go out and look for lousy information just so that they can badmouth other people. You know that.
Lawrence, I don't hear you saying anything. What is your point?
But you aren't saying anything either.
Okay, thank you for the call, Lawrence. Goodbye. Thank you.
Okay,
Goodbye. Goodbye. Goodbye, Lawrence. You know, that's too silly. I'm not going to waste my time on that nonsense. There may be people who out there go out looking for bad information. So what? There's plenty of good information to show you that fracking is lousy. I'm going to go back to this thing about New York State. There's so much to talk about here. Oh, wait, we got to take a break here, so we'll take this break.
Hi, my name is Michael. The host of the radio show you are listening to now is my father, but please, don't hold that against me. I'm a respectable businessman. My wife and I founded greenscreenpromos.com. We specialize in designing sustainable plans that help you lessen the environmental impact of your advertising and promotions, or just make mementos for your celebrations that are earth-friendly. No, we can't help you with your crazy uncle, but here at Green Screen Promos, we can help you keep him from screwing up the planet. Oh, I think I'm sounding like my dad. That's greenscreenpromos.com.
This portion of the Nobody Show is also brought to you by Home Green Home, offering organic mattresses and green lifestyle goods at 215 The Commons in Ithaca, and by the Pompous Ass Winery, which is wonderfully supportive of this show. They didn't really want an ad, but I said, come on, let me mention your name. You go to their winery, by the way, they're always playing Beatles tunes, which for an old guy like me means a lot. Okay, back to New York State, to this lie they're telling about how wonderful it is. There was a guy named Pete Granis, who was the commissioner of the Department of Environmental Conservation. And a memo was released that he had written. It was alleged that he had released it and to show up Governor Patterson at that time. And he was fired as soon as it was released, although it's never been proven that he released it. And this is what that memo said. Remember, I just played you earlier, this Mary, people going about, oh, how wonderful these regulations are in New York, how safe we'll be. This is what the head of the DEC said. Quote, the state's fiscal crisis has hit DEC particularly and disproportionately hard. DEC accounts for approximately 2.5% of the New York State workforce subject to executive control, yet DEC's layoffs will comprise more than 10% of the 2,000 positions that the governor plans to eliminate. As we experience these extreme reductions, the department's federal and state mandates continue to grow. This combination of severe resources, limitations, and increased responsibility has had a dramatic impact, fundamentally compromising the department's responsibilities to preserve the state's environment. We are now responding to and cleaning up fewer petroleum spills. Our inspections and enforcement activities in all programs have dwindled. The public would be shocked to learn how thin we are in many areas. The risk to human health have already increased. So here you have these shills for the gas company saying how wonderful the regulations are. You have the head of the DEC saying we can't enforce the regulations we've got. Public would be shocked how bad a job we're doing. Well, when Pete Granis was in office, the budget of the DEC was $513,884. That's from the 2010 to 2011 budget. Cuomo entered in January 1st of 2011. The next budget Cuomo came in on dropped from 513, almost 514,000, down to 440,000. About a 15% drop. So after Pete Granis said the situation is critical, we can't do our job, Cuomo came in and dropped the budget 15% more. New York is not in a position to enforce any regulations, much less a whole new industry coming in. By the way, I said that in my newspaper, No Frack Almanac, which you can read at nofrackalmanac.com, and you'll also see the last show archived there. Last week I said, we had made a mistake, an error in the paper, and I offered to read the name of anybody who caught the error on the air as a contest, but nobody did. But the error was, I got confused. It's the worst thing is when you think you know something and you forget which part is which. Actually, I said that Pete Granis was fired in the Cuomo administration. No, he was fired in the Patterson administration, and then Cuomo came in and dropped the budget even more. And what is the result of that? From the Ithaca Journal, May 16th, nearly 61% of the 6,300 facilities in New York with pollutant discharge permits under the Clean Water Act have not been inspected within the past 5 years. An analysis of the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency data for this report found. All facilities with Clean Water Act permits, from municipal waste plants to major industrial factories, are supposed to be inspected at least once every 5 years under inspection frequency goals established by EPA in 2007. Sites with major permits are expected to be inspected once every 2 years. Nationwide, 110,761 of 180,848 facilities, about 6 out of 10 with Clean Water Act permits, have gone 5 years without an inspection. This is what the regulations amount to in practice. There's no inspections. There's no enforcement. Here from the Elmira Star-Gazette, September 13th, 2013. Facility inspection by the state's environmental regulators declined 35% from 2009 to 2012, according to a report Thursday from an Albany-based advocacy group. The Environmental Advocates of New York study shows the Department of Environmental Conservation's enforcement actions have declined over the same time period, with violations dropping 25%. There were 840 fewer facilities inspected in 2012 than in 2009, the report found. So how does this make you feel about your Jurassic Park? How do you feel when you know they've got a Tyrannosaurus Rex in a cage and no one ever inspects the cage? No one ever makes sure the lock is any good. No one ever makes sure that the electrical transformer that electrifies the fence is any good. That's what's really going on in New York State, not just the pitch of closet shills for the gas industry. Okay, well, we have Vic on the phone. Vic, welcome back to the Nobody Show.
Hey, you're right. There isn't enough money in the DEC to regulate well drilling in New York
Hey,
State.
Vic, let's not go on to that. Let's talk about why you didn't have the integrity to properly identify yourself when you called the first time.
What are you talking about? I said who I was, Vic from the Forks.
You didn't say you were working for the JLCNY, did you?
But what's that have to do with my personal beliefs?
Oh, I see. So you just happen to be an employee of the Joint Landowners Committee of New
I
York.
don't get paid for what I do. I'm not like you. I don't get money from the Park Foundation. I don't get money from the Rockefeller Foundation.
Vic, okay, Vic, you got evidence I'm getting money for this from the Park Foundation? Let's hear your evidence. Here's your platform. Go.
Let me ask you a question.
I'm asking you, Vic. You made an allegation. You made an allegation, Vic. Where is the evidence? You made an allegation, which is everything you say is phony, Vic. You want to accuse me I'm taking money, not that there's anything wrong with it, for this show from the Park Foundation. Where's your evidence?
Give me your name.
You got a list of people who take it. It's Jeremy Alderson, Alderson. Anybody who goes to my website, you must not be too much of a hard worker, Vic, because I've given out that information. You got proof?
You call yourself nobody.
Yeah, well, okay.
You call yourself nobody.
That's the name I've used more than 20 years, but I told you where my newspaper was. My name is all over the newspaper, Vic. You've got no evidence that I take money from the Park Foundation, and I don't. As usual, Vic.
Maybe not directly from the Park Foundation, but some foundation.
Who says? Where's you got the evidence? There's nobody foundation.
Anybody that wants to see the evidence, all they have to do is go to Natural Gas Now, and they'll see the evidence.
You're lying. You're telling me that there's evidence that I'm taking money from a foundation. You're a liar, Vic.
How about your artist against fracking? How about the artist against fracking?
No, you accused me, Vic. Vic, you lied.
You got caught in this thing taking $9 million from a Saudi Arabia sheik that didn't exist.
Okay, goodbye, Vic. Goodbye. You're not worth wasting time on. Thank you for the call. You don't get to do that on this show, Vic. You don't get to call up and say, I'm taking money from the Park Foundation, which is a lie, and then go on and talk about somebody else is taking money. Try telling the truth, Vic. Not something you're any good at. So, all right, let's go on here now. I should have kept you on the phone longer. I should have, because there's more things. I just get tired of listening to this nonsense that you're putting out. You're accusing me falsely. But this is what everybody should know out here. There's no facts on your side. There's no case on your side. You got nothing but what you make up. And it's a disgrace. Okay, here from the Youngstown News. This is all over. May 11, 2014. U.S. government fails to inspect high-risk fracking wells. Investigators charged. The government has failed to inspect thousands of oil and gas wells it considers potentially high risks for water contamination and other environmental damage, congressional investigators say. The report said the Bureau of Land Management had failed to conduct inspections on more than 2,100 of the 3,702 wells that it specified as high priority and drilled from 2009 through 2012. Okay, there is no regime. There is no regulatory regime. You may as well be out there in point of fact saying, let's have Superman and Wonder Woman regulate fracking. And you can say that would be great. Superman's got X-ray vision. He can see into the ground. Wonder Woman's got that magic lasso. She can lasso a fracking executive, and he'll have to tell the truth. And you can say, isn't that going to work great? The only problem is they're never going to show up. And this big enforcement mechanism that they try and tell you that they've got, it's never going to show up either because it doesn't exist. What you have is all kinds of regulatory agencies on the states, now that the feds have been largely disabled in the dead of night. You have overworked, pressured people in the states who may technically exist. They're more real than Wonder Woman and Superman, but they have virtually no powers and can't do anything. They can't even inspect the wells. And this is what these people want to assure you. Oh, you're going to be safe because the states can do such a great job. And there's lots of things that the states can't do. Lots of things that the states can't do. That number to call in here again, by the way, is 772-1290 on WNBF, 772-1290. You know, there's some things that can't even in theory be regulated. We've talked a little about in practice this regulatory scheme doesn't exist. And remember, the issue is not regulations, it's your safety. You're not safe. They're trying to tell you you'll be safe so they can make money. And there's no safety in it because there's no real enforcement of the regs, and the regs aren't any good to begin with. But you can't regulate the water loss. They use all this water. Millions of gallons per well, and the water is destroyed. It has to be injected into these underground injection wells with the promise it'll never come back into the water table because it's so poisonous. They don't know what to do with all this water. They've tried sending it to treatment plants that can't treat it. They try to dilute it. But the fact is, a sixth of the world's population doesn't have access to safe drinking water as it is. We have states in the West that are in drought, and they're taking this water out of the water cycle and sequestering it so it can't be used again. Do you want to talk about madness? You want to talk about what's crazy thing to do? There's no way to regulate that because you can't regulate putting the water back. Oh, we got a caller all the way from Oregon, which is great. This show, of course, goes out on the web. So, Richard from Oregon, here on the Nobody Show. Welcome.
Hey, I'm so delighted to hear you on this radio program. What you're doing is so fabulous, and I just wanted to support you and tell you that you know, the fight against fracking is such an important fight, and first of all, that guy that called in is nothing but a stooge for,
of course,
you know, for big fracking. I don't know. He's probably paid by them to get on there and
he says he isn't paid, but he concealed who he was. So let's just leave it at that.
So I mean, that's the simplicity of it, and it's very obvious. But you know, you're doing a great job. I wanted to just you know, support you and tell you that out here on the West Coast, we're also interested in these issues, and you're fighting the fight, the good fight.
Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you so much for the supportive call. I very much appreciate it. And we've all got to stick together from one end of the country to the other if we want to fight this industry, because we're up against the biggest and most powerful industry in the world.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's very important. And, you know, our water, you know, Phoenix, Arizona is suffering. They're drowning in no water. And to have the water poisoned, California is drowning in no water, and to have this kind of poison going into the water table is just outrageous. And the little guy has no way to fight it. And you're the voice of every man.
Thank you,
Mr. Nobody and Mr. Everyman, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you for the
You're
call.
welcome.
And that man was from Oregon, ladies and gentlemen, so we thank you. That's the voice of authority from Oregon. Okay, we're talking about what you can't regulate, why we're not going to have this Jurassic Park where these Tyrannosaurus rexes and raptors of the gas industry will be kept safely behind regulations. Those numbers to call in again are 607-772-1290. That's 772-1290. Well, you can't regulate earthquakes either. When they started this, they didn't even know that fracking caused earthquakes. Now it's getting pretty clear that it does. They're fracking in California, where they have both a water shortage and some of the most active fault lines in the country. This is pure madness. There's nothing to be said about it. It's pure madness. This is what they're trying to justify. And there's all kinds of side effects from fracking that can't be regulated, not just the water loss, not just the chemicals like benzene and the radon that there's not even a safe level for. There's all kinds of side effects. Traffic deaths, for instance. This is from an AP story from May 5th. An Associated Press analysis of traffic deaths and U.S. Census data in 6 drilling states shows that in some places fatalities are more than quadrupled since 2004, a period when most American roads have become much safer, even as the population has grown. So you're bringing traffic accidents. What regulation is going to reduce the number of traffic accidents? Don't we already have a network of police? Don't we already have, traffic signs? Don't we have everything we can do to reduce traffic accidents? But you let fracking into your community and the traffic accidents skyrocket. Here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, August 15, 2011. Back when fracking was starting. Here's 2 clips for about that. In Bradford County, PA, when it was that's the big active county in PA now, one of them. Said in Bradford County, PA, drunken driving arrests are up 60%. Criminal sentencing was up 35% in 2010. And in Towanda, the county seat, DUI arrests were up 50%. You're going to have more drunk drivers on the roads with fracking. That's what happens. How are you going to regulate that? How are these best regulations going to regulate that? Here's from the Claims Journal of November 29th, 2011, when it was starting to go into North Dakota. The Claims Journal is for insurance adjusters. This isn't a rag that Vic would accuse of being funded by the Park Foundation. This is an insurance adjuster's paper where they want to know where the liabilities are going to be. It says, Dickinson, North Dakota police say the workload in its criminal investigations unit has risen dramatically in the last year. Sergeant Dave Wilkie told city commissioners that the unit has seen a 400% increase in burglary investigations over the last year. He said assault and sex offense cases are up at least 300%, and property crime probes have increased more than 200%. Fracking comes in, rape goes up. How are you going to regulate that? We already have laws against rape. How are you going to regulate that? But there's this other little aspect to this myth about the regulations, and when you've listened to this show, you'll know why that's a lie. It's all a lie about these regulations are going to protect us. You have to remember one thing. This industry is the 800-pound gorilla. It's the 8,000-pound gorilla, how powerful it is, and it doesn't want to be regulated. Can anybody credibly believe that an industry that went to Washington and out of sight, out of mind, and behind our backs got itself exempted from all the laws, this industry really wants to be held accountable by the states? It didn't want to be held accountable by the federal government, and you can be sure that wasn't because they thought the states would do such a good job of holding them accountable. They don't want to be held accountable. They may be telling you what great thing these regulations are, but they're fighting them tooth and nail everywhere they can. In May of 2012, an appendant in California requiring notification of neighbors and water authorities before drilling begins was voted down. A pretty common sense thing. You have to tell the neighbors you're going to be drilling. The industry objected to that. The Western States Petroleum Association argued it was, quote, unnecessary and burdensome. If you have a burn pile in your backyard, you tell the neighbors, I'm going to be burning some stuff in the backyard, so don't think the house is on fire. It's just polite. They didn't even want that. In June of 2012 in Ohio, an amendment was voted down that would have required drillers to test the groundwater before and after drilling and to notify landowners of contamination. Well, that's pretty common sense, isn't it? That's pretty common sense. You should at least check if you're doing any harm. If you do harm to the groundwater, people have a right to know. If you've gotten contaminants into the groundwater, don't you want people to know so they're not drinking that water and giving it to their children, giving it to their pets? And they fought that, and they defeated it so that they have a right to go in. They're not going to test the water before, they're not going to test the water after, and they're not required to tell you if they've polluted the water. That's what the industry is fighting for, while they're telling you, oh, it's like Jurassic Park. The regulations will restrain all these harms. They don't want regulations. And they're fighting it everywhere they can fight it. That number again to call in is 607-772-1290. Okay, in North Carolina, where they had to extend the setbacks, they've introduced a bill that, this is according to Mother Jones, would slap a felony charge on individuals who disclosed confidential information about fracking chemicals. The bill, whose sponsors include a number of Republican Party leadership, establishes procedures for fire chiefs and healthcare providers to obtain chemical information during emergencies. But as the trade publication Energy Wire noted Friday, individuals who leak information outside of energy emergency settings could be penalized with fines and several months in prison. You can go to prison if there's a leak of something and you tell, you can, okay, with permission you can tell the cleanup guys. But if you tell anybody else out there, oh, you know, this stuff leaked and it's dangerous, you can go to prison for saying that. You go to jail for that. They don't want anybody to know. Wouldn't it be the most sensible thing in the world to alert a community if a poison is in the water supply or if there's been a spill? Is there anything more reasonable than that? And they're fighting against that. They tried to put a gag order on in Pennsylvania, which was struck down, but I think they're still fighting it. That number to call in is 607-772-1290. This is what they mean by telling you about how it can be regulated by the states. No enforcement mechanism, no inspections, overworked regulators who can't really regulate a thing, constant pressure from them to make sure that the laws are gutted. That's what they're talking about. They're not talking about protecting you. They're trying to fool you into thinking you'll have some protection. Now, I have to tell you, we've been very fortunate to have a lot of support for this show. So, you know, we don't have official ads for everybody that already pre-recorded. I'm just going to read you some ads. This portion of the Nobody Show is brought to you by Glendale Farms Certified Kosher Organic Grape Juice. The ingredients of Glendale Farms Certified Kosher Organic Grape Juice as listed on the label are New York Certified Organically Grown Concord, Catawba, Delaware, and Cayuga grapes. You'll note that Frack water isn't on that list, and the folks at Glendale Farms Certified Kosher Organic Grape Juice would like to keep it that way. That's Glendale Farms Certified Kosher Organic Grape Juice, available at a natural food store near you. This portion of the Nobody Show is also brought to you by West Hill Graphics, specializing in graphic design where we make you look great in print and on the web. We also care for many rescue farm animals, and we sure don't want to see a frack rig destroy our lives. That's West Hill Graphics at westhillgraphics.com. And this portion of the Nobody Show is also brought to you by Oneida and Eagle Crest Vineyards, growing grapes for over 140 years on pristine Hemlock Lake, a shining example of proper stewardship of the land and water in New York State. That's Oneida and Eagle Crest Vineyards, makers of Oneida and Eagle Crest Pure Grape Finger Lakes wines, available at purewineonline.com. You know, it is unusual, folks, for businesses to take such strong stands. This isn't just as that Vic was trying to tell you, it isn't just a bunch of whatever he wants to accuse us of being, people who took money from the Park Foundation. These are businesses. There's a lot of reason. Remember, the gas industry is the industry that says don't pay attention to science. While they claim their thing is based on science, they're the ones who say don't listen to the 97% of climate scientists who say that we've got a problem with global warming. They're the ones who shout down everyone who brings up a scientific statement about the dangers, and they're coming out every day. Every day. And the federal government, which really basically works for the gas and oil companies, is backtracking every day. Every day. And, well, you know what? Before I get to the end of this show, I want to play another clip from Vic that was actually, that's the only reason I wish he was still on the line. But, we're going to play this other clip, which was the kind of the most interesting thing Vic said. Here.
Well, what drilling here is about isn't just about a landowner making money off of natural gas. It's about my daughter who went to Iraq and got wounded. It's about thousands of other people who went to Iraq and lost limbs and body parts defending foreign fuel interests. Not our fuel interests, but foreign fuel interests.
Now, that's really interesting to me. It's actually the only thing that Vic said that I agreed with. I do think that was a war for oil. The problem with Vic saying it is we were never told that that was a war for oil. We were told that was a weapon mass destruction we were going in there to get. Now, I think it was a war for oil. But what Vic is saying is that our government lied to us to pursue the interests of the oil industry. That's what he's saying. I am at a loss to understand why he thinks that now, maybe is it because, Vic, you think Obama is such a saint as opposed to George W. Bush? Is it that you're a stalwart of the Democratic Party and you think Obama can do no wrong? I personally think Obama can do plenty of wrong. This isn't a partisan show because I think both parties stink. But the point here is, if we fought a war for oil and we were lied to about it by the government that put the interests of oil ahead of the lives and safety of our troops, at least 100,000 dead Iraqis, some estimates go higher, our standing in the world was totally destroyed by this. And you're saying, Vic, that was done for oil. I didn't get that part. That's how you introduced yourself, Vic. That's how Vic, he didn't introduce himself as someone who works for the Landowners Committee. He introduced himself as the father of a girl who fought in Iraq in this war for oil. Wasn't even our oil. Now it'll be our oil that we're going to be. But it's still going to be the oil industry controlling our government. And he gave the perfect example of the case against fracking. We've just been in a war where thousands of our soldiers lost their lives. We lost $1 trillion more. Thousands of other people died, and our standing in the world was declined for the oil companies. The solution to that problem is a restoration of our democracy, not to give more power to the oil companies here where they can rule over our lives on a daily basis with their destruction of our protections and our laws. All because supposedly giving our lives over to the oil and gas companies is going to be good for America when Vic himself points out that we just got into a war for their sake on lies. These are the things that they say they can't even keep from tripping themselves up because they've got nothing. They've got nothing. There's nothing there. That number to call in, and remember, I'm not Tom Brokaw. I'm not satisfied to be asking the right questions. I'm here to give the right answers. They've got nothing on the other side. How they've gotten this far, without their billions of dollars, they wouldn't be this far. On a level playing field, they'd be laughed out of town, not threatening our lives. That number here to call at WNBF is 772-1290. That's 772-1290. Well, we're running out of time. So I'm just going to read you some kind of random things here just to give you a little bit more of this idea. This is from ProPublica, July 3rd, 2013. In private conversations, high-ranking EPA officials acknowledge that fierce pressure from the drilling industry and its powerful allies on Capitol Hill, as well as financial constraints and a delicate policy balance sought by the White House, is squelching their ability to scrutinize not only the effects of oil and gas drilling, but other environmental protections as well. Something that the other side tries to do is they try to paint this ridiculous picture of all these regulators out there, all this money from foundations, all of which is dwarfed by the money that's spent by the oil and gas industry. It's not real. Like I said, you'll have better luck with Superman and Wonder Woman as the regulators. They don't exist, but neither does the current regulatory regime. So I guess you get into one of those philosophical discussions, like how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. Are you better off with a really good regulatory regime that doesn't exist, or a really bad one that does exist? Well, that's a toughie. But there's no regulation for fracking, not in the sense that they present it to you. Not in the sense of there's somebody out there watching out for us and protecting us. That doesn't exist in the United States. And that's why we've got to keep fracking out of New York State. Once they get in, what we get is a lot of misery, not a lot of protection. Now, let me read you something else. You know, it's the other thing I said last time out. The amazing thing to me is how they get away with this thing of their dirty-handed industry. And how they get away with presenting themselves. Everybody else is bad but them. This is an industry that's killing people all over the world, polluted environments all over the world. And let's talk about remember, we've had the existing oil and gas industry for more than 100 years. Never mind the fracking part. It's been regulated. So listen to this. There are no national figures on oil and gas spills or enforcement, but where state records are available, they show agencies pursue fines against oil and gas producers in only a small minority of spill cases. The Wyoming Department of Environmental Quality pursued water quality fines against 10 producers in 2012, records show, as it recorded 244 oil and gas production spills. In Texas, the leading producer of oil and gas, regulators sought enforcement for 2% of the 55,000 violations identified by drilling inspectors in the last fiscal year. In Pennsylvania, the heart of the Marcellus shale gas drilling boom, 2012 records show state regulators levied fines in 13% of the cases where inspectors found violations. And in New Mexico, oil and gas regulators haven't issued fines in years. There is no enforcement regime. Doesn't exist. That's from Energy Wire, July 15th, 2013. Try this one. This is a press release from the Public Employees for Environmental Responsibility. These are people who are fed up watching what goes on under their noses in the very federal regulatory agencies that are supposed to be watching out for us. This is their release. The Federal Pipeline Safety Agency has not conducted a single surprise exercise for more than 8 years to determine whether an operator can execute emergency response plans. Federal guidelines call for up to 20 unannounced exercises annually to demonstrate an operator's ability to respond to a worst-case discharge spill event. Yet in documents obtained in a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, the Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration concedes that it has not conducted any unannounced safety exercise since 2005, when it only conducted one. There's no regulatory regime. It can't be regulated for all kinds of theoretical reasons, and in practice, it's not being regulated. So what are people doing when they call in from the industry and they tell you how great the New York regulations are, when they tell you the states can do a better job than the federal government? What are they doing? They're not telling you the truth about the regulatory environment. They're trying to lull you and gull you. You are the mark for them. You are the pigeon. You are the one they want to convince. Oh, everything's going to be just fine, when in fact there's no chance on earth it's going to be just fine, because there's nobody there to make it fine. Even if fracking could be regulated, which it cannot be, for every kind of reason, there is no enforcement regime in the sense that they would lead you to believe. No one is really watching out for us. No one is protecting us. They don't even levy fines, and some of these things should be criminal. Some of these things, you know that last year somewhere, I'm running out of time, I have the quote, as much oil was spilled in the United States as was spilled in the Gulf of Mexico by the BP Macondo rig when it burst in that big Deepwater Horizon spill. The same amount of oil in thousands of little spills was spilled all over the United States. This is a dirty industry that we've been living with for a long time. Why is there this outcry? Now the industry would have you believe there's all these wackos out there who suddenly became aroused. For 100 years we didn't have this, even with all the spills, but for 100 years there were two things that were different. One, we weren't using all these poisonous fracking chemicals and blowing them into the ground. And two, we weren't facing global warming. So we have a lot of reasons why the whole thing is running out to begin with, why because of global warming they just can't do it any longer. And because they're doing this poison and destroying the water, it's more serious than it was. But it's a dirty industry with dirty hands making accusations at everybody else. So I want to close, as I always do, with a paraphrase from Ben Gurion. If you don't believe in miracles, you're not a realist. So let's get realistic about fracking, and let's keep it out of New York. I'm nobody. Good night.
You won't take nobody when you go. You won't take nobody when you go. You won't take nobody, but if you do right by God, He'll lead you to the sea where rivers flow.
You'll find where news breaks first. Binghamton's news leader. News Radio 1290 WNBF Binghamton.